Here's an exclusive clip from our most recent Patreon episode. To join our Patreon, hit the link in the description below. Fast forward, though, to Moment of Contact. So you go down with him summer 2021 to Brazil. James's process is he goes and does that. He comes home and he just goes, he built himself an editing room. It's like exactly what you think. He goes in there and just loses himself for months to get it done. I mean, the guy puts together all his own stuff, which is pretty incredible. So he does that. He ends up coming on the podcast. Episode 1, we did a full day recording. It was like 6 hours. The first episode was on the phenomenon, and then we stopped and took a quick break, and then came back and did a full like 3-hour, 20-minute episode on Moment of Contact. And that's one of those things that I'm really grateful for with this podcast, because the documentary had come out and it was doing fine, but it deserved a lot more. Because the story, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but you have to check out the episode. But the story is insane, and the level of work James did on this for so many years was insane. But in doing that, that episode went a little nutty, and we had a bunch of clips do well as well. And he ended up, it was cool, because there were people who had seen the podcast who were like going in as a guest on Joe Rogan and clearly talking about the podcast. And then Joe hit him up and had him on, which I'm grateful he did, because that catapulted Moment of Contact not only to #1 UFO documentary in the world, which I think James had accomplished at the beginning himself when it first came out.
Yeah, I think it might have been like that first month or something.
Right.
Yeah.
But when he went on Joe's show, it also became at one point for a couple weeks like the second best-selling movie in the world behind Avatar, which is crazy, which gets to our story here and why we want to bring this up. So, like I said, we've been talking about doing an episode with James over the past few months. We're probably going to do one like in the spring. He has a new documentary that's going to be coming out. It looks like this summer. I'm not allowed to say the name of it yet, but the name is fucking sick. And all the cuts we've seen are incredible looking. I mean, it's going to be a really, really good documentary. That said, I'm going to be careful. Even on Patreon, it's less of an audience, but I'm going to be careful what I say here. James has talked publicly now a bit, without going into a ton of details, about the behind-the-scenes problem he's been having over the past year. So we're all on a group text together. We're all really good friends. And James mentioned, what was the first thing he said to you, Alessi? Don't say the number amount. Don't say the money amount. But what was the first thing that the production company was supposed to give him?
So he was owed a substantial amount of money as soon as he released the film. Like, he actually turned it in to the company because there was like a guarantee where it's like, if you get in within this time, we'll give you this much. And, you know, whatever. You make this much, you're just guaranteed this. So he was rushing to get this thing done. And, you know, he was like, the last month before it came out, he was like, I was literally, you know, working my butt off. And, like, you know, it was rough. And I got it in. And then I was told, actually, we don't, you know, we can't get this to you right now. Or it was one of those things where it's like the money didn't come. And then it was a conversation. And then he was like, oh, it's like, don't worry about it. It'll get there eventually. And then, you know, we started hearing signs of this where he's like, yeah, I just didn't get this, but they said they're going to get it to me in a month. And it kept being like a can kicking down the curb. And then, you know, it escalated from there.
So we're talking about, are we allowed to say the name? I mean, people can figure it out, right? Who we're talking about. He said it, right?
Yeah, it's there's a ton of websites. I keep forgetting the name, though.
It's 1091 Productions.
Yeah, well, yeah. I guess now it's called Chicken.
Yeah, they're called like Chicken Soup for the Soul. They're a fucking Ponzi scheme. They're scumbags, and I hope they all go to prison. But, yeah, last May, it was funny how this happened. James mentioned something, and James is legit the nicest fucking guy you will ever meet. Like, he is the most happy-go-lucky, hope you're doing good, doesn't, you know, isn't someone who's going to be suspicious of other people right away, unless he's working on a story. He kind of has to be with that. But, like, in life, he's not like that at all. He's, like, so laid back. And he mentioned quietly that he went on Rogan in April and things went nutty after that. And he mentioned that he wasn't getting paid. And immediately, when I hear something like that, maybe it's just because I'm from fucking New Jersey. I'm used to people fucking other people over. But I'm like, he ain't going to get paid. And, you know, at the beginning, I'm sure he thought that was a possibility, but he felt like it was going to work itself out. He had a couple good relationships over there at the company. But then, I forgot to tell you this, I had Ron James in. Mm-hmm. I recorded that one like 6 weeks before it came out. It came out July 3rd. I recorded it the end of May. And Ron is also, all the major UFO directors are at 1091.
Not good.
And so Ron had a documentary come out that year. And he was telling me he was already having problems. Now, Ron comes on the podcast. His documentary shot up to number 2 on the charts because of the podcast we did. He saw none of the money. And Ron was in my ear. I give Ron a lot of credit, too. Ron was in my ear about this quietly over, like, the next 6 months, a bunch. I'm still talking to Ron about it. And so I start going back to James like, hey, man, you know, this is a problem. And he goes, I know. I'm talking with Ron. I'm talking with some of the other directors, too. And all of them weren't getting paid. And so they've been trying to work out ways to get money in the door. James got, let's call it, no money in the door. It's basically no money. He effectively is owed millions of dollars. He had the #1 documentary in the world last year that he put all this effort into. And the bottom line is he's never going to see that money.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just, the way I see this potential legal solution going out that they're talking about right now without going into details, he is never going to see any of that money. He effectively just put out that entire movie, did all that work, everything that Alessi just told you about, for free. Probably lost money, actually, because he spends some money on... Like, here's the other thing about James. He travels everywhere, the story is. And he's regularly financing himself doing it. This guy puts his money where his mouth is. He's all over the world tracking down stories. So his budget already has some built-in expenses that are part of him being able to do his job. And it really makes me sick to my fucking stomach that a company would do this to anyone, let alone all these people, let alone someone like James Fox, and think they can get away with it, which in a way they kind of are, which is really disappointing. So what we'll do, we have to see how this legal solution they're allegedly coming to works out and what we're allowed to do. But when James comes in, I would like to expose the fuck out of that company. I'd like to expose everyone there by name and picture. Go through it all. We won't dox people or stuff like that. That's illegal. But I'm saying use their publicly available information and put their feet to the fire and never let them do business with anyone else ever again. I mean, they've stolen tens of millions of dollars from these different directors who they financed all of them. I mean, it's a Ponzi scheme. The way I'm hearing it and what I'm hearing about what's going on in Q1 this year, I don't know how it's not a Ponzi scheme. It sounds exactly like what Madoff was doing. The promise of constant money, that's going to be coming, and it never does. So we'll do that episode with James. I would really like to see that do well, and I'd love to see our people support that. I know we're just talking to the Patreon community now, but I'm going to say this, and this is the only time probably you'll ever hear me say something like this. Do not go out and buy the Phenomenon or Moment of Contact right now if you haven't. Don't do that. Because they need to get this legal situation through, and then James will be able to make money when you do that. But when we go to put out this episode, the legal situation will be done, knock on wood, and I'll be pushing that as well. I'd love to see people go support him because, I mean, no one deserves what just happened to him.
I know, and he literally gone through this. He tells the story, like you said in the Patreon episode, of his struggles with the Phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And then it's like he's going back to what this was again. And it's just, I don't know. Just the whole, it's not Hollywood, but just people, productions, money, and just corruption at the top of that. And it just sucks because it's like this guy made an amazing documentary, and it's not like there's evidence that it wasn't great. He didn't make any money. It's like, dude, he was on the charts. Like, everyone saw that. He's right behind James Cameron. It's wild.
See, that's the thing, though, too. Like, you talk about Hollywood and things like that, that, you know, it's an insider's game and you're not in it. The nice thing about that stuff, though, is there are lawyers everywhere and there are contracts everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it is, you know, they lock that shit down so much, whereas this company was like an upstart getting in on the business through money they earned in other things, and it's not like that. And so, you know, James still had a contractual, like, he wins contractually, but they're such a joke of a fucking place that owes everyone money and has no money because they're literally a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter what he has in contract. He could sit there and win this case and let it take 6 years and he'll see no money. So why would you do that?
Yeah. It's like, what is winning at this point?
Yeah. So without going into detail, he's going to win the case, but not that way.
Yeah.
But
we'll get him in here, though. And then
yeah.
hopefully change that direction.
We'll get him in here and talk about it. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you'd like to see this full episode, you can do so by joining our Patreon community by hitting the link in the description below.